The Right Side with Doug Billings.
Hey everybody, my name is General Mike Flynn, and I'm here to do a big shout out for my great friend and one of the best in the business, Mr. Doug Billings. Right Side with Doug Billings, Right Side with Doug Billings. Doug is the future of the airwaves when it comes to independent broadcasters and podcasters. He is the new Rush Limbaugh. He's exactly what America needs right now, looking for honesty, looking for wisdom, looking for truth, looking for patriotism. Listen to Doug Billings at Right Side with Doug Billings. God bless you and God bless America, and thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are winning. We're winning, winning, winning. Welcome to The Right Side with Doug Billings. Are you ready?
We are not liberal snowflakes who melt away in the face of tragedy, adversity, and challenge. We are a covenant nation under God, and his divine providence is not dead and it's not gone. It is living within each and every one of you. And you will bring it to life in such a way that the world has never seen before. We never back down. We never give up. We march forward.
Ladies and gentlemen, today on the program, as I look back, obviously Charlie Kirk is still on everyone's mind, and we are awaiting the memorial service this weekend. As I look at what's going on here, and I think that these things are related to a degree because the radical liberal movement in the country is all of us, and the heads exploding over on that side because of the issues of free speech and so forth. All of it related to Charlie, but with two new dynamic news items that I want to talk about today. And if you want to be part of the conversation, I would love that. If you want to join, 636-224-6300 is the phone number. So today I want to talk a little bit about the Jimmy Kimmel issue and Antifa, because the radical left, look, we need to set the record straight, as we always do over here on the Real Talk Radio Network. There is no spin. There is nothing but truth and thoughtful, accurate analysis. We are not a conglomeration of conspiracy theories, nor do we post and talk about half-truths and theories that aren't based in fact. So first of all, point number A, the radical liberal movement in America is not a pro-America movement. Now, I'm not saying they're a majority. They're clearly not. In fact, they're a very small minority within what used to be called the Democrat Party. But they have got control of that party in a big way because they have the media, they have our educational institutions and so forth. So their bullhorn might appear to be very loud, and sometimes it is very loud. But there are more of us than them. And in fact, my friends, there are more reasonable people who are still traditional Democrats, even though that party no longer exists. I'll get to that in a moment. But there are still reasonable people out there who believe that, what they see from the radical left is shocking and frightening. And that's why we've had record numbers of young people throughout this country sign up to existing TPAC USA organizations or have started their own in memory and in honor of Charlie Kirk. That's why we've seen millions upon millions of adults come over to the right side, to the conservative movement, because they look around at what they've been seeing lately and they're thinking to themselves, quite rightly so, this is not what I signed up for. This is not the America that I believe was inspired by the divine providence of God and our founding fathers. And they're coming over to the right side in record numbers. So there's great consolation in that. And it bears out what I always tell you. In the midst of tragedy, adversity, and challenge, there are always, and words are important, always blessings that are waiting to be born in the midst of tragedy, adversity, and challenges. Yeah, the radical left on their ear about the Jimmy Kimmel thing, the firing and so forth. And I want to talk about that because you've got Kimmel, who's a late night clown who has no credibility in the real world. Who's been benched and indefinitely by Disney, who owns ABC, and the liberal tears flowing like a broken fire hydrant. I actually take great pleasure in watching that, but I want to explain to you also what they're screaming about and how it's wrong, because they're claiming this is all censorship. And that's what you see. Now, what has happened between the time Disney has benched Jimmy Kimmel, and today is precisely this. And I'm not making this up. I'm not being flippant about it. This is not some sort of a cynical comment. This is not an analogy. Here's the truth. The radical liberal left, the hierarchy, and I mean members of the elected class, the media, and talking heads, and journalists and pundits, if you can call them journalists, they get together on Zoom calls, conference calls, Skype calls, whatever, and they discuss, okay, what are we going to say? How are we going to spin this? What are we going to say about Kimmel? Censorship. That's it. Okay, censorship is the one. We're going to go with censorship, and everybody's got to be on cue. We're going to have Cindy over here send out the talking points to all of you via email. You'll all have exactly what you should say. And beginning today at noon, we're going to talk about this. And here's what you say. And this, ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, this is exactly why when people put together montage clips of the radical left news media, the mainstream fake news media, this is why everybody on different channels, different day parts, and different programs are all saying the same thing, because they have meetings about this and they discuss what they're going to say. And they get their marching orders from the hierarchy and the radical liberal commu-socialist, formerly known as Democrat Party, and then they're off to work. And that's why we hear censorship today throughout all of the news outlets and on social media. But they point the fingers at President Trump, his administration, the FCC, claiming that this is some sort of a totalitarian plot to silence anti-Trump voices. That's baloney. It's, as Rush used to say, BS, Barbara Streisand. Well, it's not censorship. This is a private company finally waking up, at least to a degree, that Kimmel's spewing blatant falsehoods, lies, and misinformation, and, by the way, hemorrhaging viewers faster than a Democrat loses an argument on taxes. This is what the decision is all about. The facts are clear, and it all started with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. The suspect, who I'm not going to mention in that assassination, left behind evidence of a leftist ideology, confirmed by the FBI, by the Utah authorities, by Governor Spencer Cox himself. The indictment, all of it, lists these left-leaning liberal ideologies that this assassin held. But what does Jimmy Kimmel do? He jumps on his show, ties this assassin to the MAGA movement, twisting reality like a pretzel in order to bash Trump and try to mislead his audience. That's purposeful misinformation, and the liberals own that market. They continually put out misinformation. This is the kind of information that gets people riled up. It makes people angry, and it causes the mentally ill to snap and go out and harm people. I could show you a 2.5-minute montage, and I'm sure many of you have seen either this, what I'm talking about, or something similar, where you have everyone from Nancy Pelosi to Chuck Schumer to Madonna to actors, comedians, the guy that plays, what's the guy? Gosh, the guy that plays the pirate, Charlie. I forget his name. It's not important. You see, I'm not in tune with that world. But it's a montage of talking heads on the news networks, political members, actors, musicians, comedians, calling and demanding for anarchy, arson, and assassinations. I could show you a 2.5-minute clip of it. We're going to get into this where they purposefully twist all of this. But Disney has stepped in and they've yanked it, and I'm grateful. Finally, we get some semblance of intellectual maturity over there, because affiliates like Nexstar, who owns 32 ABC affiliates, Sinclair, all began to put pressure and say, we're not going to air this guy anymore. In this environment, we can't have Kimmel be saying things like this. So they preempted it. They demanded an apology. Kimmel has refused to apologize, by the way, and his ratings are down. I'm going to pick up right there when we get back, reminding you, ladies and gentlemen, that over here, you'll never hear misinformation. You'll never hear conjecture based on conspiracy. You'll only get thoughtful analysis like I'm providing here, or the factual news items that we can find and get verified through our sources. You don't get twisted nonsense. That will get people fired anywhere, not just in television, but in the real world as well. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think I'm up against a break here, but time flies when we're having fun. Listen, I'll be right back after you take a trip into capitalism. Stay with me.
The Right Side with Doug Billings.
When you're with me, we always meet in determined prayer, determined patriotism. That is how I roll, and I'm sure that most of you roll that way as well. Today, talking about, first of all, the Jimmy Kimmel the Jimmy Kimmel experience, ladies and gentlemen. I am excitedly happy about the fact that finally someone being held accountable in the elite liberal left. But this is a business decision from Disney. This has nothing to do, as I was saying in the first segment with you, nothing to do about censorship. I'm going to explain all of this and why, so that when you're at your weekend cocktail parties and you're gathering together with your liberal friends, you have ammunition to verbal ammunition. You know that when we say that, folks, we don't mean real ammunition. Don't let the radical libs and the kooks spin what I'm saying, because they'll definitely try, so that you'll have the words to countermeasure what the radical liberals are saying. So Jimmy Kimmel, let's just take a look at some statistical facts here. So his ratings in the proverbial toilet, ladies and gentlemen, 1.6 million viewers as of yesterday. All right. Now, that's 37% less from what he had in 2016, 2017. And it's a whopping 72% loss in that key demographic, the age group between 25 and 54. So it's capitalism at work. Look, see, when I was in corporate America, I came out, I started a show, I put it on YouTube. We would get a few million people. I could beat CNN on a good day. And I'm not bragging, because that's the Food Channel can beat CNN. So Kimmel's ratings are for a national, traditionally broadcast network to have those kinds of ratings for someone in his position is terrible. Just absolutely terrible. So what we are witnessing here, in fact, is not censorship. It is capitalism. It's not some kind of a government gag order that's been ordered from on high, from the FCC or from President Trump. Now, Kimmel, until now, has thought that he was untouchable. But Disney treated him like that annoying little relative that we know at Thanksgiving who just can't shut up about politics. Hey, you're a comedian. His jokes about politics aren't funny. And he's clearly, purposefully, like they all are, purposefully attempting to misalign facts and misrepresent the truth. So his problems have come to roost, and here we are. I think that when we look at this, knowing that it's not censorship. I mean, censorship is when the government steps in, folks. The government has not stepped in here. I mean, it's like Big Brother, right? Big Brother steps in. You can't say that. Not when Mickey Mouse and Disney and their company come in and say, hey, we're going to make a few changes here because this isn't working. Disney's a private company. They get to decide, Disney does, what airs on their network, just like you get to decide what channel to watch or what burger joint to go eat at tonight or over the weekend. Disney executives, including, by the way, the co-chair Dana Walden and the CEO Bob Iger, they made the call, not the FCC, not President Trump, and with no pressure from either of them, by the way. So Dana Walden, Bob Iger made the call, and they benched Jimmy because they knew that had he gone on last night, he was already preparing to double down on what he had said the prior night that got him fired, benched, because they knew that he could make the situation even worse. And so, ladies and gentlemen, to be clear, this is not erasing voices. What this is Disney protecting their brand from a host who's become a liability because he continually spews false information. He falsely linked the Charlie Kirk assassination to the MAGA movement, ignoring every bit of real evidence and verifiable evidence of the assassin actually being tied to leftist ideologies. So private companies, folks, fire people all the time for spreading lies that hurt the bottom line. You can ask any HR department. Oh, and by the way, before leaving, I was talking about my time in corporate America. I left corporate America in 2020 to start my show called The Right Side. And I was a vice president of human resources prior to all of this and prior to 2020. So I can tell you with 100% certainty and accuracy and honesty that companies fire people all the time for this kind of thing. Going out on Facebook and misrepresenting the company. Get fired for that. But liberals love to cry foul, but when they see conservative voices get booted or canceled from social media, they're all for it. Remember? I mean, hypocrisy much, radical left? In 2021, just 7 months after I started my show, and I had been putting it up on YouTube, I was a beginner. So YouTube was my platform. I got more viewers than CNN over there after 7 months of doing the show. And again, like I said, I'm not bragging. The Food Channel can beat CNN in the ratings, but you can probably guess when you get that many viewers what happens next. They canceled me. YouTube wiped me out without warning, you get the little, you violated our terms and conditions of service. Well, what specifically? Can you nail that down? I can only imagine it was because it was back in the time when we were just experiencing the theft of an American presidential election and the concoction of a deadly jab that was being marketed as a vaccine. And I was talking about those things on my show, so I'm certain that that's why they canceled me. But with Jimmy Kimmel, Disney is saying enough with the fake news. Jimmy, you're costing us eyeballs and dollars over here. Nobody's watching. Nobody's spending any money on advertising. We're done. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a pure business decision. No government strings attached. Imagine if Kimmel had tried to do something like this in a real job. Hey, boss, I lied about the quarterly report. I fudged a few numbers here and there. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Would have been out. Lickety split. So that's what happened. This is not a censorship issue. It's a capitalist issue. Ladies and gentlemen, all right, up against another break. I'm on this thing, and if you want to be part of the program, feel free to give a call, 636-224-6300, and you can be part of the conversation. I appreciate all of you out there. I'm going to be right back, Truth Seekers. Don't you dare go away. We've got so much more to talk about, including the Antifa designation as a terror organization. Hang with me. We're in this together. I'll be right back.
The Right Side with Doug Billings.
Oh, yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from smack dab in the middle of the fruited plains. And you can listen not only in the plains, but anywhere in the world, my friends. If you get the app, get the Real Talk Radio app, go out there to your favorite app store, pick it up. You can listen to us anywhere in the world. And that virtually guarantees that you become part of the most intellectually mature audience in all of radio land, folks. Look for the Eagle logo when you go to your app store and get that Real Talk Radio app, folks. That's how we do it. So I want to go deeper. I want to go deeper and to dismantle this narrative because we are seeing such an avalanche of misinformation about what's really happening with the Jimmy Kimmel debacle and the firing of him, the benching of him, indefinitely or whatever. We'll see how long the benching or the indefinite time period lasts. But at any rate, I want to countermeasure the radical liberal mantra out there that is begging you to believe that this is a censorship issue. It is not. I'm going to dismantle the liberal narrative that President Trump and his team or the FCC are acting like dictators, going out and erasing anyone who's anti-Trump, right? First of all, there is no zero, nada evidence of any of that nonsense. There's no evidence of government involvement at all in this situation. We have Disney firing or benching one of their employees. The FCC might be sniffing around this debate or this discussion in the peripheral, seeing who is misleading, who's breaking the regulations of the FCC, but they're not involved directly. Look, if we had anything that would indicate that the government is involved, especially Trump and his administration, you can better believe that it would have been leaked. But the FCC is not. This is all Disney's doing. Internal pressure from national affiliates who were worried about their local markets. Trump didn't send in the troops. He didn't order the firing. Liberals claim it. They claim totalitarianism because liberals cannot fathom a world where their heroes face consequences. That doesn't compute for them. But here's the truth. Private companies have the right to curate content and fire their talking heads, their personnel who sit behind a microphone or in front of a camera. They can fire them. The First Amendment, and here's where some people go awry, the First Amendment protects us against government censorship, not corporate decisions. That's what's different with things like Facebook. I've been on my own social media, and I've deleted a comment or two from somebody who is just putting forth hate or abject nonsense. And they will sometimes try to respond, you don't appreciate free speech. Free speech has nothing to do with Facebook and me posting my opinions. And it has nothing to do with you, anyone who chooses to respond. The First Amendment applies to the government and what it does to censor us. It doesn't apply to you and me on Facebook or any other platform. So and I'm trying to be gentle because I know that people are easily confused by that. But if Disney lets Kimmel spread lies that inflame tensions, like falsely blaming MAGA for an assassination that is really, according to the facts and the evidence that have been presented, tied to a leftist ideology, then Disney would be inviting lawsuits, boycotts, and more, even worse, rating flops than what Kimmel's giving them. So you see, they've got to make this corporate decision. We're going to be sued. We're going to lose viewers if we don't do something. And so they made that decision. Now, when Trump was in office before, remember his first term, do you remember the liberals cheered in unison when X deplatformed him, Facebook deplatformed him? And now where are they? Pot, meet the kettle, right? And a word or two about the FCC, which all of us in the broadcast industry know a thing or two about. The FCC is an organization of regulators. They are not dictators. They ensure that broadcasters don't abuse public airwaves with blatant lies that could incite harm. Kimmel's not erased, ladies and gentlemen. He's just in a timeout. We'll see where he lands. We'll see where he shows up. I mean, he could very easily go to SiriusXM or Netflix or a platform hosted and owned by liberals and have his own show there. But we'll see. If this were a dictatorship, I mean, for the love of Pete, he'd be in a gulag, not chilling out, sipping on a margarita in his mansion, counting the money that he's earned, spewing hate and lies, and very little comedy. So this all really, folks, I mean, I know that you and I get this. We have to talk about it again. I want you to know this is an expose. It exposes the radical left's reliance on misinformation. Kimmel's comments, they weren't just wrong, they were dangerously divisive. He ignores the FBI confirmations of the suspect's ideology, all et cetera, the proof and the evidence that's been put forth so far. And I don't say this often about Disney, but they acted responsibly this time. Like any company who wants to avoid not only a public relations nightmare, but a lawsuit or just a further crash of their ratings. And liberals are calling it some sort of an erasure. Well, you're erasing a voice just because it disagrees with President Trump. But that's their playbook. That's what they do, folks. They project their own authoritarian fantasies onto us. Liberals say Trump's a dictator for this? Really? The guy's too busy winning trade deals. He's too busy over in Europe making sure that whack job of a prime minister is going to get his import-export spreadsheet in the right order so that we can start making America first again abroad. He's too busy ending endless wars. He's too busy bringing America back. He's not going to micromanage Jimmy Kimmel and Disney. I mean, if you think about it, if it was Trump's way, and if he was a dictator, Kimmel would be hosting a show called Who's the Wife in Leavenworth Prison right now. I mean, let's be clear. Trump is not involved in this. Not involved. And I understand the radical liberal playbook, but I want you to know this also. This projection of their own authoritarian fascism. They scream fascism, Nazism, and they believe it, I think, some of them in their heart. Now, for some, they're just following orders. They really don't believe that, but like I said earlier in the show, they have meetings about content, and they're all from various networks on these calls, Zoom calls, Skype calls, etc. And they're given orders about content, about what to say. And they're also given, and we're going to talk about this in the second hour today with regards to Antifa, but they're given orders about what to do. And so that the chaos you see in America, my friends, from the radical liberal left, this chaos that we've seen, especially during the time of Biden and Kamala Harris, was all purposeful. It has always been purposeful. The open borders, it's the number one example that you can use of the chaos that we all experience. It's no mistake. They open that border up, and I've said this before, because they want to expand their electoral base and they want to dilute the identity of America itself. The more people that come in here, the more diluted our American identity becomes, the further they can catapult their liberal agenda across the nation. And that's why they did it. Now, there's more nefarious reasons in there, too. And by the way, there are still people in this country who want to do us great harm because of that border policy. Trump's locked down the borders, but there's still people here who want to hurt us. This is purposeful. And it begs the question, Doug, why? Why in the world would anybody want to? Because the radical liberal left is trying their best to carry out the orders given by President Obama during his presidency. Remember his mantra? They made this sound like a friendly campaign slogan. He said that America has got to be fundamentally transformed. Away from what? I said to myself, because right then and there, immediately, as soon as I heard that from Obama, I knew that was an anti-American sentiment. America does not, thank you very much, need to be fundamentally transformed, especially away from the divine providence of God and the intent of the founding fathers, which is exactly what Barack Hussein Obama intended and meant when he said that. And so ever since, this cascade of chaos, this cascade of anarchy, riots, and assassins have been thrust upon us because they believe, the radical left kook fringe believes, that the more anarchy, the more chaos they can incite in this nation, the more apt we are to believe that big government is the only way out. Not each other, the government. You can't help each other. You need the government. And we need to fundamentally transform America, by the way, away from this thing called divine providence. You see, they can't have God. That's why they excommunicated God literally from their platform. They took God out because you can't have anything higher than the state. Folks, these are the things that you can talk about with now you put it in your nice, friendly, conservative way and your manner. We don't have, pallets of rocks, bricks, and stones delivered to street corners so that our side can throw them through storefront windows. We don't do that. We aggressively seek the truth, which is what Charlie Kirk was doing in his career, aggressively pursuing the truth and peacefully pursuing debate and engaging in debate. And we shouldn't I shouldn't have the threat of harm or death for giving you my opinion, nor should you by giving me yours. That's not how we work. But when people celebrate this, it becomes an example of a systemic problem within the radical left. And J.D. Vance is absolutely correct when he said the vast majority of this violence happens as a result of members who are part of a radical, extreme liberalism in this country. Liberalism is at fault. They don't believe in God. They can't get their head around that. They don't have any concept of the true intent of the founding fathers. Check that. I think they actually do. They do know what the divine providence of God is, and they do know what the intent of the founders are. They choose, however, to purposefully ignore and table those, and in fact, work against those things. Because again, it doesn't fit their agenda. The almighty state must be at the top of your list, not this thing called divine providence. Certainly not the intent of the founding fathers. We can't have that. No. We have drifted so far away from what the founders intended from this for this nation, for this republic. And that's the thing. And I'm going to tell you this again. Watch carefully. You will never see, and words are important, never see a radical liberal, a member of the elected class, for example, or a talking head on television or the radio, refer to us as a republic. It's a democracy. Our democracy is in danger. Doug Billings, that Real Talk Radio, they're a threat to our democracy. Well, we're a republic, but they won't say that because republic is the root word of Republican, and we have a Republican form of government in this nation. That's why the radical liberal left doesn't say it. They are at war with the divine providence of God and the intent of the founding fathers, and Jimmy Kimmel represents a small piece of how that evidence of the obvious is sufficient. We can see it, plain and simple, mislabeling truth and trying to convict us of the slaughter and the assassination of an innocent man. And that is the trigger that the mentally ill need to go out and continue the cycle. And the left know this to be true. They know it to be true. Stick with me, ladies and gentlemen. My, oh my, we're more than halfway through. I'll be right back. You're going to enjoy this trip into commercial land, but stay with me. More on this topic when I get back. Cheers.
The Right Side with Doug Billings.
Another one bites the dust, ladies and gentlemen. Could it be that Jimmy Kimmel was the one that bit the dust? I bet that's what we mean. Don't forget, Monday, October 6th, mark your calendars, October 6th, Monday, The Right Side with Doug Billings will debut right here on the Real Talk Radio Network. What an event. How proud and happy I am, how grateful I am for that opportunity. Monday through Friday, noon to 2 o'clock. Noon to 2 o'clock, The Right Side with yours truly right here. So, the Kimmel benching. Disney, a private entity, chose facts and intellectually mature business acumen. If you're from Raytown, Missouri, that means business sense. On Kimmel and his ego-driven monologues and his misinformation of truth to fire him. We'll see where he resurfaces. Kimmel will probably resurface somewhere, and probably sooner than we would like. But it is not a government action that we're witnessing. So make sure that when the liberals that you encounter on social media, always politely, or at your family table, politely and calmly, and with every amount of decorum and good manners that you always use, explain these things to your liberal friends. There was no evidence. There is no this Trump dictatorship nonsense that the liberal left puts out. It's capitalism correcting a clown. Is basically what we have here. So, and the liberals had better take note, really. I don't give liberals free pro tips very often, but the claims that they put forth are all falling flat, and they have no ability to self-reflect on their actions that have caused them to lose multiple millions of members, multiple millions of registered voters. They don't know how to do it. And when they chip away at the truth like that, that's what we can experience. And they've done it. You know, folks, this is nothing new. I know that 2020 was a trigger point for a lot of us and a milestone because it feels like that theft of the American presidential election, all of a sudden, everything just came down at once. And How does this happen? But the radical liberal movement has been working behind the scenes to do those kinds of things since the times of John Rockefeller, John Dewey, and Andrew Carnegie. All three of those men, by the way, lived and worked and became vastly wealthy because of capitalism, but in their private lives, every one of those men, all three of them, were avowed socialists. All three of them. And they began to use their money and their wealth and their foundations to take over first our educational systems. Hey, if you want our money, you're going to have to do away with this founding father curriculum stuff, and you're going to have to adopt our ideologies. And the woke movement really, in a lot of ways, was born way back then because they worked hard to get rid of things like God, the Bible, prayer, philosophy, and Latin, all taken out of the public school system. And all of those things, God, the Bible, prayer, philosophy, and Latin, are all part of the mechanisms that we use and can benefit from when we are in pursuit of becoming critical thinkers. I used to be a teacher. I have a master's in curriculum and instruction, and I know philosophy and religion, philosophy, Latin, and religion when you debate these things, when you study these things, you develop critical thinking skills, and the left doesn't want anything to do with that. That's why in a very real way, they don't teach cursive anymore. And some of you may laugh and think I'm full of it, but they don't want these kids to be able to read the founding documents. They don't want that. It's part of their agenda. It is not accidental. It is on purpose. And so if I would look back, and if you want evidence of what the founders intended, especially with regards to school curriculum and society, you would see that every one of the founders, no matter even the most liberal, even the Benjamin Franklins and maybe even the Thomas Jeffersons, they wanted prayer in public forums. Look at their private writings, their journals. Read the Federalist Papers. For those of you who haven't, read them. This is what the founders envisioned, and it is all wrapped in the divine providence of God, the Bible, philosophy, Latin. Philosophy being the key mechanism by which we can teach kids to become critical thinkers. It's a requirement in most colleges, at least it was. And then Latin, the language of science. We need to get back to these kinds of things to countermeasure the radical liberal movement, and they know that we know that. And so to a degree, every one of these victories is no matter how small it may seem, is significant because we have to do away with people who put forth the false initiatives and especially don't follow the true intent of the founding fathers. Like I said earlier, we have drifted so far away from what they intended. Look at the way criminals are dealt with. We don't prosecute. Liberals don't prosecute with extreme prejudice. If they do prosecute, the criminals are given light sentences or they're let out early, no matter how long their rap sheet is. This all ties back to their desire to instill and unleash purposeful chaos. There's no other conclusion that we can draw, folks. This is what I mean. This is all on purpose. This is by design. And we are now awake, most of us. We have a lot of people to shake yet and wake up, but there are multiple millions more awake. And the radical liberal left, in fact, is helping the reawakened movement, the rebirth, if you will, of the divine providence of God in this republic. Because John and Jane Doe on the streets of Jefferson City, Missouri, or on the streets of Billings, Montana, or on the streets of San Diego, California, are looking around and saying, this is not what I have in mind. This is not what I have in mind. And it's also not what I think the founding fathers had in mind. So multiple people, millions of people coming over to the right side. You know, good people are affected when bad things happen. That's why whether or not you knew Charlie Kirk or not, you're affected by him, by his death, because you're a good person and good people are affected. And when good people see evil people making fun of those events, they want to leave or disassociate with the people or the group or the ideology that are saying and putting forth those things. That's why we're winning. That's why we're winning. So much there to think about, and we definitely are in a spiritual battle, and it does us, I think, all good to realize that the divine providence of God is stirring in this country. America was never on her deathbed. She was in a nightmare, and she has awakened. And people like Charlie Kirk have helped that process expedite and become truer, faster. It's for me so obvious that the radical left does this purposefully and with intent. I could go on and on and on, list after list of items that they've done on purpose to try to derail this republic. How could anyone draw any conclusion other than purposeful chaos when you see not only the stuff that Jimmy Kimmel, in fact, in the grand scheme of things, Jimmy Kimmel is a small cog, but a vital one because of the amount of people he has influence over in his audience. But as far as ideologies, the open border, the soft on crime stance, the fact that leaders, governors in these blue states don't want help from the National Guard or from President Trump or from whomever to reduce crime. I mean, that should speak volumes. I can't fathom first. I'm really trying to understand how anyone anymore could support a radical liberal politician. God help them in New York. If the commune socialist gets elected as mayor of New York, God help them. On the other side, I also think that go for it. Let him win. In fact, I hope he wins, because if he does, when the people see the chaos that is associated with that party come forth after he wins, more and more people will rise up and become awakened to the diabolical nature of what they're putting forth. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've only just begun to scratch the surface. And speaking of dangerous ideologies, Antifa, just labeled a terrorist organization by Trump. I'm going to talk about that the next hour. Ladies and gentlemen, stay with me. I'll be right back.
The Right Side with Doug Billings.
We have also in the mix the designation by President Trump of Antifa as a domestic terror group. And finally, it's happened. The masked mob of mayhem makers now officially designated a domestic terror organization. And right after the events of Charlie Kirk and so forth, when he scribbled the radical liberal messages that he had on the bullet casings and so forth, Trump calls Antifa a major terrorist organization. And he's vowed, and this is where I think it gets interesting, he's vowed to investigate the funders, the people who are giving the money to these organizations, and see what they can come up with then. I finally like what I'm hearing here with these investigations. George Soros, who's no stranger to you, I'm sure, ladies and gentlemen, the king of the money for provocateurs, the king of the funding. Wouldn't it be grand? Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be glorious to see him investigated and audited and held accountable if justice warrants it? And maybe a high degree of speculation, but Soros owns a lot of radio stations in this country. And I know, at least in my neck of the woods, I have my best friend, in fact, Zeke Montana. He wouldn't mind at all me saying his name. Was the morning drive disc jockey on a station 106.5 The Wolf over here in the Kansas City area, at least. And Soros and these stations are whittling out and getting rid of staff. Talk about what we did in the first hour, and that's his right to do it. You know, the owners of these companies and these radios, they have a right to fire people. They do. And for no, I can tell you, as a former HR vice president, ladies and gentlemen, most companies live and operate in states that have laws that allow them to fire you. And it stinks on every level. If you're the one being fired, it's never any fun to be in that situation. But they can, if you wore purple shoelaces and the company didn't like it, they can fire you because of that. I mean, so that's, I'm digressing, but I want to make sure that it's, Jimmy Kimmel and being fired and other people being fired by people who own radio stations, television stations it's okay. But George Soros is firing people too, to save money, because some of these disc jockeys were making too much money, or because they didn't agree with the political ideologies and so forth that they had. So it's very common, more common than you would like. Jimmy Kimmel's case just made the news, but now we have Antifa, and we have them now in the news again. I know that I believe that the Department of Justice and the FBI are going to begin to look in to the Antifa movement, and they will begin, I think, as a result of that, to look into people like George Soros. And let me say, since I mentioned the FBI, let me just say something about Kash Patel. So I know Kash Patel. I've met him in person several times. He's been on my show a few times. I've spoken to him about these kinds of issues. I'm not claiming that I know. He's not my best friend. I've got his phone number. It's not like we call up each other and say, hey, what are you doing tonight? You want to come over for dinner? It's not that. I don't want to mislead anybody. But I mean, I've called him. I've texted him while he's been in his current role. I just don't think Kash Patel is capable of putting forth a false flag or false information or misleading us in any way. I trust him. And I trust Dan Bongino. I've never met Dan, but I trust him based on things that he said, and so forth. So when they do these investigations, whether you're looking at the Charlie Kirk assassination or others, I'm going to wait and watch and see the evidence in the case. I'm going to see what I trust him until I'm given a reason not to. I trust him. But back on point here with regards to Antifa and the liberal state of mind. You see, liberals are in, and this is the fun part of this job, is because I love it when liberals are in meltdown mode. I get a kick out of it. Claiming Antifa is just this, and they call it a decentralized ideology. That's all Antifa is. It's just this idea. It's a decentralized idea, meaning that it's people in this pocket of the world, this pocket of the country, whatever. It's just decentralized thoughts and ideas. Well, that's the biggest bunch of nonsense that you're going to hear from the radical left all week. Okay. Decentralized ideologies don't burn down cities. They don't incite arson, anarchy, or assassinations. Antifa's roots, ladies and gentlemen, go back to the Rose City Antifa group in Portland, Oregon, and they blend communism, socialism, all of the isms that are evil, into a violent conglomeration of dangerous kooks. That's really what it boils down to. The members of Antifa and groups like it are dangerous kooks. And they've been linked to, we've all seen it, riots, violence, arson, anarchy, and now assassinations are in the mix as well. No, I'm not blaming Antifa for Charlie Kirk. I'm just saying those are the things they call for. And it's not abstract, my friends. It's not abstract. It's anti-American anarchy. And it's real. Liberals say, okay, Antifa, and they'll remind us that, don't forget, Antifa stands for anti-fascist. It's a virtue. We should all be anti-fascist. Well, I'm anti-sardines, but I don't go around blowing up boats, fishing boats, over all of this, all right, over my dislike of sardines. So don't give me this decentralized ideology nonsense. It is a real threat comprised of real people who carry out real chaos. And it's part of the overarching liberal plan, their playbook: incite chaos whenever possible. And if chaos doesn't happen organically, we'll create it artificially. George Floyd, perfect example. George Floyd dies of a drug overdose, and they blame a cop, and they blame the right, and all of a sudden that's the trigger that they needed to riot, Antifa. And boy, did they. The Summer of Love up in Seattle. Remember the mayor, the governors up there? Crazy. We're going to have a Summer of Love. Antifa, welcome. And they created Chaz or Chop or whatever they called their town up there. And it was the summer of rape, murder, arson, and anarchy. And it's a matter of record. It's a matter of fact. This is what they do. So I know that I'm preaching to the choir. You all get this. We happen to be conservative. We see this. We know it. But I am reiterating what we should all be armed with, and that is the truth. Armed with the ability to countermeasure this nonsense when we see it and when we hear it, and to be a point and a place where you can find truth. That's what Real Talk Radio Network is all about, the place where you can find the truth. Hopefully, these kinds of things, every time the radical liberal movement fails to properly self-assess where they are in conjunction with their relationship with the American people, they fail because they don't get us. They don't understand decency, for one thing. They've omitted God. They don't believe in that. And we confound them with those ideals, with conservative principles. All right, more to talk about with regards to all of this. If you want to be part of the program, 636-224-6300. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be right back. Stay with me. Cheers.
Fast on a rough road riding. The Right Side with Doug Billings.
The liberals insist, when thinking about Antifa and other various liberal organizations, it's just an idea. Don't get all freaked out. This is just a decentralized ideology. No. And again, like I said, ideas don't coordinate attacks. Ideas don't show up in black bloc uniforms to smash windows. Okay. And you have people throughout the country. The Department of Homeland Security, its former director, Chad Wolf, had called that designation of a domestic terror group long overdue. And it is. And I mentioned their rampage that we saw take place in 2020 after the George Floyd death from illegal drugs. Portland burned for months. You have other cities throughout the country burning for months during all of that. This is the stuff Antifa was born to do. And I'm convinced that when you look at, the entire January 6th event and all of that, you'll see, I'm sure, and I hope that I'm right about this. We'll all see, I hope, the truth. But we know, and we get a sense from the hearings that we've already had, this was an a moment that was incited by members of this group and others on the radical left, dressing up as people from the MAGA side, causing violence and chaos, so forth and so on. You have other cases of this, not just the George Floyd case. You can look to almost any blue state in this republic. In the land of the king of the kooks, Gavin Newsom, down in California, protesters in San Diego who were part of Antifa, they were found guilty of what they did. And many of them got prison sentences of up to 2 years. Might not seem like a long time for the damage they did. They didn't, in this particular case, we're not talking about murder or anything, but of that nature. But at least even in California, we're holding the kooks accountable. But it's not decentralized either. It's organized. And you know what? It's organized crime. That's what Antifa is. Hiding behind an ideology will not work any longer. We're calling you out. The radical fringe of this commu-socialist, formerly known as Democrat Party, fuels division as par for the course with them. And they absolutely cause destruction, both with regards to their ideology and with regards to physical structures in this republic. The toppling of statues comes to mind, doesn't it? That's Antifa at work. That's the ideology of the radical liberal movement at work in America. And look how the rehearsed and the unified commu-socialist, formerly known as Democrat Party, responds to this. Dan Goldman is a representative in the New York government, and he's whining and complaining that it's a pretext now to start to target opponents. The right is coming after us. Conservatives are coming after the left. With this designation of a domestic terror group on Antifa, they're going to start coming after us. Anybody who disagrees. Big brother, big government, tyranny, totalitarianism. But where is the outrage, Representative Goldman, when it comes to real violence, real assassinations? The domestic terrorism label means, among other things, but primarily it means now this group and its members are subject to real consequences, investigations, being part of no-fly lists, tougher sentences when and if convicted. This is not a designation that's given to peaceful groups with peaceful speech and unifying natures and tones. It's given, rightly so, as its name implies, to terrorists who will threaten your life if you disagree with them, who will, because they don't believe in the insurance company's grip on certain aspects of business, will buy a hoodie, walk down the street with a handgun, and shoot a president of a health company in the back and assassinate him. This is Antifa. This is the mindset that's out there. And these are the actions that are born from that mindset. So we have a lot of work to do, as we engage, you and I, in what I call determined patriotism. We have a lot of work, and our voices are rising up. And it's not just because ABC fires Jimmy Kimmel, and it's not just because President Trump designates Antifa as a domestic terror group that we're having these kinds of results throughout our country. It's because you and I are awake, and it's because you and I are making our voices heard. That's the real reason behind the mechanics and the movement of all of what we're seeing today. So have faith and be encouraged in that, because that's as it should be. The change that we want to see in this republic never happens first in Washington, D.C. It always happens at your local level, right where you live. And that's why, as my friend General Flynn always says, local action has a national impact. And he's exactly right. And these are examples of it. It's because of the awakening that conservatives are experiencing, feeling, and speaking out about that these changes and these kinds of things are happening. Real pressure. Look, the network owners, operators of ABC and local television stations around the country didn't just decide on a whim to cancel Jimmy Kimmel. They probably would have gone along with him and not fired him had you not spoken up. But because you have spoken up and have done so loudly and clearly, the owners of these TV stations, radio stations, etc., took action. And as a result, Disney took action. So you see, it's a bottom up, from the ground floor up change. And that's what determined patriotism is. It's the hard work of it all. You can apply the same principle to your local school boards, getting involved with your local board of county commissioners. That's where it begins. That's the kind of thing that gives me hope. It's real easy, if you're like me, you're out and you're looking and you're thinking about what's going on in this country, the assassination of Charlie Kirk and the whole leftist ideology, the void that we have on that side with regards to God and the founding fathers. And it's real easy, especially for a baby boomer like me, to say, gosh, I'm so glad I've got 20 years left, maybe 30. Gosh, I'm glad I don't have to live through and see what the radical left is going to do to this country. You see, it's easy to think that way. And it's easy to get down about, wow, the track and the trajectory of our country. But I'm here to tell you that we are not on our deathbeds in this country. America is in a nightmare to a degree, but everyone always wakes up from nightmares. Stay with me. A lot more to talk about with regards to Antifa and this designation of terror. I'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome to your life. There's no turning back. Even while we sleep. The Right Side with Doug Billings.
Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. The radical left, the Antifa group, and being designated a terror organization, has put the radical liberal movement again on its ear. Here, we're walking through that, and it's, I think, appropriate because in America, as we look at the state of play currently playing out in front of us, with regards to assassinations, with regards to the radical left movement finally being held accountable, at least to a degree, on a major network, on television. Now we turn to these groups that have embraced this radical, violent, anti-American rhetoric. And, you know, sometimes I say it in jest when I say the Communist Socialist, formerly known as Democrat Party, but it's true that that party doesn't exist anymore, really. There are still good people, you know, the John and Jane Does of America who live on Main Street, USA, who may think that they're Democrat, who are good people, who don't, in other words, espouse or believe in violence, arson, anarchy, and assassination, who are still really asleep to what the Democrat Party has become. But multiple millions of people are, and that's the evidence of why so many are coming to the right side, coming over to the conservative movement in America, registered voters. It's going to be interesting this coming midterm election season to see if that translates into losses for this radical liberal commune socialist, formerly known as Democrat Party, or if it turns into victories for them. So it'll be interesting. Do people really walk the talk at the ballot box as far as what they say now in public with regards to these groups? Because they are leaving. They are leaving that party. We'll see what happens. But Antifa, the decentralized excuse they used, meaning that it's some sort of an esoteric, undefinable, movement that takes part of, it's ideas. Really, it's not people, it's not action, it's not events. It's this ideal that we have. It's abject nonsense. Okay, not going to buy it. It's a cop out for really people who are cowards, who commit violent actions and then they go run and hide. That's what Antifa is. Sometimes they do the events right out and open. They're all masked up and so forth and so on. I've talked about the masks. You know how I feel about the masks. But it's also cover, Antifa is. Antifa provides cover for criminals who are funded. And I'll bet my last dollar on it that by funded, we're going to find out that people like George Soros are, and that's no big stretch, I admit, that's no big stretch. And I hope that we see real evidence and proof of this that leads to accountability. Now, I've always cautioned people when we start to talk about accountability, you are not going to see all of these perp walks that sometimes people want to, and I'm not, if you're one of the, I don't blame you for wanting it. I want to see accountability. But, back in the days when we all lived through the theft of the American presidential election, when Trump lost, right? There was a significant enough amount of people who were saying things. I mean influencers and people that had, quote unquote influence, because they sat in their mom's basement, in their underwear behind a computer screen and in front of a microphone, who would say things like, well, don't worry. These people, Hillary Clinton and Adam Schiff and Chuck, they're really in Gitmo right now. These are all body doubles we're watching. Oh, and Trump, don't worry. He's going to be ushered back into office before 2020, before 2024. Don't worry. And by the way, don't let me forget to tell you also, the military's in charge. They're running our country. So I have always, all of that's nonsense. And I will always tell you when it's nonsense. We cannot deal in nonsense. We have got to remain grounded in reality. None of that is true. And so when we talk about accountability and we talk about justice, I always warn people that, remember, justice in America is designed to be purposefully slow. Swift justice, yes, we want swift justice. We all do. But justice by itself means we've got to be sure. We've got to be sure of all of this. I've got a, looks like we've got a phone call. Let me see here. Eric, you think that the left has done everything and it vindicates people like Joe McCarthy and so forth. Eric, are you on the line, my friend? Are you there?
Yes, sir.
Eric, where are you calling from, first of all?
I'm calling from the highways of Indiana.
Awesome. So you're listening to us on the app. God bless you. All the way from Indiana, Hoosierville. What's on your mind, Eric?
Well, I think that all of this stuff that has been going on by what I refer to as the Commie-Crat Party, the actions of Antifa, these from kindergarten through the top universities, statements by elected officials like that wide-mouthed looking bullfrog, Maxine Waters, and so many of these others, the garbage that they say, the poison that they say. I am convinced Joe McCarthy has been vindicated when he warned us decades ago, if this wasn't curbed, this is what's going to happen. And here we are today. And I want to get your thoughts on that.
Eric, I think I'm spot on. I mean, you're right. The McCarthy going after the communists and so forth, and the radical left, knowing that he was close to the truth and over the target, began to manipulate what he was saying and tried to spin him into some sort of a monster and a creature. I think that, there's very definitely those kinds of similarities today going on. And Eric, I mentioned earlier in the show I could play for you a 2-minute and 30-second montage of all of the people you've just described in the elected class, the Maxine Waters, the Nancy Pelosi's, the Chuck Schumers, and people in the news media and actors and comedians and musicians who have all been caught on tape in the last 4 to 5 years calling for arson, anarchy, assassination, primarily against President Trump. But this all has an effect. So, Eric, I thank you. Yes, I think you're onto something there. I'll give you the last word.
Okay. Joe McCarthy said in a speech many years ago, one communist on the faculty in any American university is one communist too many. And because of the way the kids have been turning out for decades, I'm convinced he was proven right. And we should not be demonizing the man. It's time to lift McCarthy up and say, hey, he was right.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate you on the roads of Indiana listening into the Real Talk Radio Network. Thank you. I appreciate it. Folks, let me piggyback on a few things that Eric is talking about there. And I mentioned briefly in the previous hour, Eric is right that in as much the communist socialist movement in America overtook its first agenda item was to overtake our educational institutions in this country. And there were 3 men primarily involved with all of this at the very beginning. This goes back about 186 years or so with Andrew McCarthy, with Andrew Carnegie, and with John Dewey and with John Rockefeller there. Those are the 3 guys. Now, all of them multi-millionaires, vastly wealthy, and they got that way by using and working in capitalism. They were giants of capitalism. However, in their private lives and in what they really wanted to accomplish, all 3 of those gentlemen are avowed socialists. Look up something called the Frankfurt School out over in Germany. These men were disciples of the Frankfurt School. Socialism must reign. Here's how we do it. We infiltrate. And first of all, we've got to infiltrate the educational institutions, because that's where the minds that are young and palatable and soft and formidable, right? We can change the minds of the youth if we get a hold of the American educational institutions. And what American educational institution has never wanted or needed money? And these 3 guys had plenty of it. So their foundations would, and employees and so forth of their foundations would solicit the American education institutions, high schools, colleges, universities, etc., and say, hey, if you want some money, we'll be happy to fund you, but you're going to have to adopt our ideologies into your curriculum. And that was really the birth of the woke movement in America. And it doesn't get enough attention, and not enough people talk about it. You should look up and research the Frankfurt School, ladies and gentlemen, because it has all of these principles and thought patterns were taught in it, and Carnegie, Dewey, and Rockefeller were disciples of that movement. And they took over the schools and they began to indoctrinate our children and form their curriculums that raised up generation after generation of these of a radical left-leaning class of people. And so there you are. And that's why today we have, this movement, this I shouldn't say movement, but this demographic of kids who are radicalized against the foundations and the principles set forth, not only from the divine providence of God, but the intent of the founding fathers. That America is not born in exceptionalism, but it's born from slavery and evil and so forth. So that's what we're up against. And it's not going to be easy to solve. We are on a right path right now, but we've got to keep that going. This is the earmarkings of everything that Antifa stands for: radical liberal violence and radical liberal claims that are basically at their root intellectually immature and not right. But you have radical liberal experts like Alex Northwash that says that Antifa represents protected speech, or that groups that incite riots, chaos, and violence are engaging in protected. That's just not true, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone knows the old adage: you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, right? So free speech is free speech, but free speech ends when violence begins. So you've got a group, the ACLU. They're, of course, now out fretting about First Amendment rights with regards to Antifa and so forth. They ignore how Antifa silences others through intimidation and bullying, etc. I think that you'll find a lot of truth when you look at the root cause. But much more to talk about. I'll get into it here in a minute. I'm going to leave you some nuggets that you can use this weekend when you're at the parties with your liberal friends. But don't go away. I'll be right back.
The Right Side with Doug Billings.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Doug Billings here this afternoon on your Friday. How is it possible we're at the last segment of the last hour of our time together? Hey, a reminder, don't forget, mark your calendars. Monday, October 6th, my show, The Right Side, comes right here to the Real Talk Radio Network. I'm happy, proud, honored, and very grateful for that opportunity. Monday through Friday, noon to 2 o'clock, right here on the Real Talk Radio Network, where I will do my best to make sure that you remain part of the most intellectually mature audience in all of Radio Land. So Antifa, as we begin to close out, the mindset, the thoughts, the agenda of the radical left. And as we look at that and we apply it to Antifa, silencing other people through intimidation. You've seen it a million times. You've probably yourselves, I would imagine, have been the victims of silencing or canceling in one form or fashion or another. I had an entire show on YouTube wiped out because YouTube thought I was, too conservative. You're telling too much truth that goes against our narrative. It goes against our agenda, so we're going to cancel you. I'm sure all of you have at least seen or heard of such stories. But this is not, as the radical liberal movement will try to convince you, this is not about beliefs. Okay, this is not about ideology. This is about actions. Burning cities in 2020, right? Court-convicted assaults of people who would pillage entire cities, burn them. Minneapolis comes to mind. And don't forget, who's the governor of the state of Minnesota? Governor Tim Walz, who's the poster man of the wussification of the American male, ladies and gentlemen. Tim Walz himself allowed Minneapolis to burn. He refused to send in the National Guard. He refused to stop the arson and the anarchy. And it begs the question why, and I've answered it time and time again today, but just to drive the point home, because the radical liberal movement in America wants violence and chaos in this country. They want it. Ladies and gentlemen, Evidence of the obvious is sufficient. Antifa's tied to radical left elements in this commu-socialist, formerly known as Democrat Party, that promote not only communism and socialism, which are bad enough on their face, but they promote actions that undermine our republic. Antifa is not anti-fascists. They are the fascists. And they're using force, just like the radical left in general does, to suppress anybody who dissents from their point of view. And so President Trump's move to designate this group as a domestic terror organization empowers law enforcement to root them out without trampling real free speech and what the founders intended with regards to that. If Antifa is just an idea, I mean, why do they need masks then, ladies and gentlemen? Are they afraid of bad hair days on the day of the riot? I mean, what is it? And you know my point of view about the masks. Anybody who knows me and who's listened to my shows, the masks were never about health back in 2020 when the COVID nonsense began to filter down and cascade upon us. Never about health. They were always about political signaling, and they remain such. If you see a young person especially, 80% of the time, if somebody's in a mask, they're just donning the new uniform of the Communist Socialist Party. That's part of their uniform. That's part of how they identify themselves now. Wearing of the mask, political signaling. All of these things that we have seen are done on purpose with regards to what the left has put forth upon us. From the borders to not prosecuting law, to the rhetoric that has led now to the assassination of Charlie Kirk and to the firing of Jimmy Kimmel. This country, America, was founded on exactly opposing viewpoints and ideologies. We were founded, I often say, as I look at the founding of America, we're fortunate in this country. We have really three documents that were inspired by God. We have the Holy Bible, obviously inspired by God, written by men, and we have the United States Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, inspired by God and written by men. And some would say the Bill of Rights too, and I'm fine. We are a country that's inspired by God, and I, for one, don't believe that God abandons things that he starts. He might sit out for a time and let us learn our lessons with our own stupidity at play, but he doesn't abandon. If we were to buy in, he doesn't abandon the church that he started. He doesn't abandon anything. If we were to buy into that, we would then be forced to assume and conclude that God certainly has abandoned the human race. If you're going to use, well, we've made so many mistakes as a country, God certainly has abandoned us. No. God, no, not my God. That's not the way that my God operates. I don't think that's possible for God. God can do anything, but he won't abandon anything that he started. If we did that, if we believe in that, then we're hopeless, because we would have to conclude that because of the mistakes we've made as a human race, God would have had to abandon, and he hasn't. And that's my hope. That's the reason, as I see this great reawakening occur in this country, that's the hope, because he hasn't abandoned us. He gives us these signs. In another way, another sign, if you will. The assassination of Charlie Kirk has caused an entire generation of people to rise up, and rightly so, and good. But also look at Erica Kirk. Look at that woman and watch her in the days and the months and the years to come as she takes over the helm of that organization. A real prophet, and perhaps someone, I don't want to say prophet necessarily. I want to say, like an Esther, and for a time such as this, here she is. But time will tell. But these kinds of signs give me hope. The signs of young people, especially young men, as a result of TPUSA, Turning Point USA, coming to the conclusion that they do believe in God and need a God, and they want the traditional American family experience that Charlie talked about. The American family is the single most important social institution in the world, and we're on the cusp of losing it thanks to a feminist movement that was born in the 1950s, took root in the 60s, and exploded in the 70s. Because, that claim, we don't need men. You don't need you women. You can do it on your own. Folks, the realization and the reawakening to the understanding and the truth that men and women are different, it's a beautiful thing. We are not the same. We're not designed the same. We're not supposed to be the same. We act differently. We behave differently. We have better gifts, and we have different gifts. Some are better, some are worse. Women are better at some things than men are, and men are better at some things than women. We're different. And there's only two genders. And all of these truths that are now part of the discussion that we've all been seeing, and make no mistake, in a very real, dramatic way, this is the divine providence of God stirring amongst us, reminding us of these truths. And so it might take a period of adversity, challenge, and sometimes tragedy to see these blessings being born, but believe it. When you're in those moments, adversity, challenge, tragedy, there are blessings there waiting to be born. And that's the great hope of conservatism. Radical liberals don't get it. That doesn't compute with them. But for us, we know. And so it does my heart well and good to see some of these blessings now being born and seeing evidence of them. And I think that when we look back on these moments, Charlie Kirk's assassination, there's only a few times in history people go, do you remember when? Like, John F. Kennedy. Do you remember where you were? I'm much too young to have a personal memory of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, but there are people that did never forget it. The assassination of Robert Kennedy, Bobby F. Kennedy, and his father, and Elvis. Where were you when Elvis? I mean, there are people that remember these. Charlie Kirk is of that lineage. His assassination will be remembered for years and decades to come by the generation to whom he ministered and worked, the Gen Z youth movement in this country. And it will be glorious to see these things burst forth and come to life as a result of that tragedy. And that's the hope I leave you with as you head into your weekend, ladies and gentlemen. America is vibrant. America is alive. America is strong. And America is back on the right track. We will work earnestly, won't we, to keep it that way, to make sure that our reawakening continues. Enjoy your weekend, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great one. Thank you for letting me be here with you this afternoon. God bless you. We're in this thing together. Believe it. For the Republic. Cheers.
The Right Side with Doug Billings.